This episode of EMS ONe-Stop is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's lexipol.com. Hello and welcome back to another edition of EMS ONe-Stop. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence, and I said this last time, I'm going to say it again. We've got off to an amazing year of having some guests that reflect what is going on currently, what is happening in the future, and also what I'm going to focus on in 2025 is that one thing that all of our surveys across the Lexipol group of companies, what paramedics want, what cops want, what firefighters want, have reflected on is the big question of leadership. And I want to use my platform here in 2025 to bring in leaders from both inside public safety and also outside public safety to talk about their reflections, their approach, their ethos, their way with being a leader and their views on leadership. And to kick off this particular sort of segment of the EMS ONe-Stop, I would like to welcome my guest, who is the 37th Commandant of the US Marine Corps, General Robert B. Neller. Sir, welcome to EMS ONe-Stop.
Rob, thanks. Great to be with you. Look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And so for full disclosure, General Neller and I met recently at the SHOT Show in Las Vegas, where Lexipol was sponsoring the LEAP program, which was a leadership session, which had a number of great speakers. General Neller gave his views on leadership, which is where I invited him to come and talk to us and talk to you all out there. We also had an Olympian and also a Special Forces guy from the UK, and I'll talk about more of those after the break. But it was a great opportunity to celebrate leadership. And so to start us off, General, what I like to invite my guests to sort of give their own resume, if you like. And obviously 40 plus years, I think, in the US Marine Corps. So would you give us your bio, sir?
Well, I grew up in Michigan and somehow got into the University of Virginia. And like many people, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, had aspirations to be an attorney. And because I didn't get into the law school I wanted to, and because with a friend, I joined the Marine Corps Officer Candidate Program between our junior and senior years. And I wanted to get married, and parents were getting divorced, and I needed a job. So I joined the Marine Corps. And I was going to do it for 3 years. And as my late father-in-law used to say, life is what happens when you're planning other stuff. And, my wife and I had a child and then another child, and she liked the life and moving around. And for some reason, unknown to many, I continued to get promoted. And, next thing you know, had the great honor and privilege of serving as a commandant of the Marine Corps. So, retired now for 5 years, gotten involved with some law enforcement training and some consulting and public speaking and education. So trying to keep myself busy, but clearly want to do anything I can to help people that are in law enforcement, emergency services, fire, corrections to feel better about their work, which is critically important. Never going to be able to pay you folks, just like the military, what you're worth, what the nation needs, but thank you for what you're doing, because the society needs it. And I appreciate it. I know most people do.
Thank you for those kind words, and they will, of course, be passed on. Of course, you've led Marines and the Marine Corps on operations downrange. You've also led from a policy perspective at the highest echelons of Marine Corps, and indeed, US defense and US defense policy. And I guess just to sort of start us off, of course, you as the leader, whether you are Lieutenant Neller or General Neller, have to, have had to make decisions under pressure at those various levels. And how do you train yourself to do that? And then, how do you go through the process of taking a decision, whether it's big or small, and also having to live with those decisions?
Well, I think just like in law enforcement or emergency services, making decisions is part of your training. You're expected to make decisions. You have to make decisions. You're in a critical point, in many cases, life or death. You got to make the call, and so it's part of your training. So you're inclined to do that. Now, then the next thing is, do you make the right decision? And do you make it in a timely manner? And we've all made good decisions. We've all made less than good decisions. Uh, but hopefully, the outcome, sometimes you make a good decision and the outcome isn't what you want. So I think we all train ourselves, we educate ourselves, we read, we study, we read case studies, we learn about other people, we go through simulations and training. I mean, the military, has the advantage that law enforcement doesn't have. If we're not doing a real operation, we're training. I mean, law enforcement, you're doing the operation every day, so sometimes the time is just not there. And I've observed, I've seen this to do the training you need to rehearse, to practice. As is said, time on rehearsal or reconnaissance is seldom wasted. And so if you get a chance to rehearse, I mean, and rehearsal is part of a decision. What do we, do the what if? What if this? What if we stop somebody and they do this? What if we come across somebody and we do this? And you know the law, the policies. So it's practice. I mean, and so you do the best. I think you get better as an experience. You see it. I've seen this before. I have an intuitive way of how this is going to go down, but you still got to make the decision. And I think people that are in the line of work in the military or law enforcement, I think they're inclined to be people that are decisive and want to make good decisions for the right reason.
Firstly, General, you've hit on one of my favourite quotes, Duke of Wellington: "Time spent on reconnaissance is seldom wasted." But also that very real point, and I'm not sure those that are working in public safety appreciate what you just said around the fact that the military can stop, reset, rehearse, and then redo. Whereas, particularly, law enforcement, fire and EMS, to also an exceptionally great degree, are on ops all the time, and that's a very real problem, I think.
It is, and I think a lot of it has to do with the level of manning that's out there.
Right.
When we were in Iraq in 2006, I mean, we would pull units off to give them a bit of a break and take a shower and sleep and get some good food, but then we'd also go through a training period, review the rules of engagement, go through some marksmanship stuff, could do some scenario based stuff, talk about what happened and give them a chance. I think with law enforcement and emergency services, that's very, very difficult today because you're just kind of day on, stay on. And, and I do think, this. I mean, if you get tired, your tendency is to take shortcuts, to forget your TTPs, make mistakes. I think we've all thought about if the times when we didn't make a good decision, you go back and I was hurried, I was rushed, maybe I wasn't thinking, I got distracted. I mean, it's difficult to focus and be 100% all the time. But, to me, if there was anything if I could have had a magic wand, I would put everybody's manning at 110%, which would allow people to go through a training period. Because there's all sorts of great things out there for virtual simulation, a lot of stuff that you do in the academies. But then are you able to repeat that once you get out, doing the day-to-day mission?
Again, another great point that it would be good to be at the 110%. Of course, we know that across all public safety right now, we have recruiting issues. We also have retention issues, and part of those retention issues are there's not enough people to do the job. So why am I sticking around? And it becomes a sort of ever decreasing, circle. Um, But of course, you talked about the training, and one of the things I'd had down to ask you about is that obviously realizing that we can't have an absolute safety stand down, we can't go away for 3 weeks to a sort of maneuver area to practice and rehearse outside of obviously basic training and academies, etc. So how can we sort of get on with that, the training? And you're also a great fan of repetition in the training as well, in order to probably establish a sort of a muscle memory. um, how can we do that in our stations and in our bases and our posts in order to actually be a useful first responder on operations on the ground?
That's a difficult question. I mean, if I'm in fire, I mean, EMT, I mean, I'm not sure you're always on the road. You may wait for the call. So you have some time, I would think, to be able to do a simulation. And there's a lot of great simulation things that don't require hard stand. It just takes a set of goggles like meta goggles, and a computer, and you can do that. So and there's groups out there that are marketing and selling that, and It's something, and it also, in addition, it allows the supervisor to be the controller and put people in different scenarios. If you show up for a shift as a police officer, I mean, you're just, you get the brief, you get the desk sergeant, and you tell you where you're going to go. They give you any intel that's out there, tell you any areas of particular interest. At least this is what I've observed on a couple of ride-alongs, and you're out. And then you come back, you do your shift, you got to write in a report, you got to rewrite, and you got to turn in all your kit, and then you want a PT, you want to go home, you want to see your family, you got to rest, and then, you know, 14, 15, 13, 14 hours later, you're back and you do it again. So it's very difficult. And I don't know if there's time at the beginning of a shift. I mean, you'd have to be really cleverly skillful to be able to do a sim with a set of goggles and a computer. It'd have to be almost already set up. I mean, some of this stuff you can get and you could do it at home, but you got to rest. You got to be with your family. You got to take care of your life. Uh, so I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult. I think some of the particular professions within emergency services and law enforcement might have a better opportunity to do it. Others, I think it's just really, really, really challenging. I have seen, for example, there's a facility nearby here, the Advanced Law Enforcement Emergency Response Training Center in Kyle, Texas, sponsored by Texas State University. I've seen officers show up there in uniform. They've gotten permission while they're there. But if there's a call, I mean, if something happens and they get called, they got the radio on, they got to leave. Some of them paying for that out of their own pockets because they just want to get the training. They want to get better. They want to get the certifications. Maybe it's going to help them get promoted. And I incredible admiration for people willing to do that and the support of their departments to let them go over there while they're on their shift, so to speak. So uh, it's hard. It takes extra effort, and it you know shouldn't be to me to tell people they don't do this. They have to make that call themselves. But it's just tough.
Actually, that's also an excellent opportunity to drop in a couple of free resources that agencies can tap into. One of those is the Emergency Management Institute in Emmitsburg. They actually have a course catalog from everything from EOC operations down to press information officer courses. And there is a catalog for that. If you're certainly in the public sector of public safety, then those courses, including transport to Emmitsburg, are free. Also, FEMA runs some excellent courses in Anniston, Alabama, where they actually have an old hospital they repurpose into various scenario-based training. Again, some excellent sort of opportunities there. And again, I will endeavor to find those and put them in the show notes. But if you have the opportunity to send folk away to those two establishments, and certainly back in my day, General, actually, we took our whole city EOC to Emmitsburg, where they have an emergency operations center trainer, and they put you through the ringer, everything from tornadoes to active shooters and everything in the middle. So those are some resources out there. It takes a bit of pre-planning to do that. That said,
There are some other public universities. I know the University of Virginia has a School of Continuing Education for Public Safety that offers courses for supervisors and others to get a degree or certification. So then is the grant money going to continue to be there to do that? I hope so. Uh, I believe it will be once we get through this initial kind of look at federal agencies. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's out there if you want to find it. So you got to put some effort in, and if you can post stuff like that and help your audience find that stuff, I think that would be a great
Yeah.
use to people, and hopefully some people, if they have the wherewithal, can take advantage.
Yeah, and you make a really current point there. The fact is that at the time of recording, obviously there is a lot of close scrutiny of public spending. We know that, and obviously a lot of the stuff that I've just talked about, of course, comes from possibly grant funding, certainly the public purse. We have to wait out and see what's going to happen there, but hopefully those essential tasks will remain. Let's leave it there. We'll have to come back and look at that in 2 or 3 months' time. But certainly those things are out there, and we hope sincerely that they last. Risk and mission. Last week on EMS ONe-Stop, I actually had the lawyers from the Elijah McClain case, and they represented the firefighters that were dealing with Mr. McClain. A very sad outcome all round. We know that. But of course, the risk versus action. When do you stop and sort of think, should I do this? Versus the need to get into action. And this is something you've talked about before. How do you navigate this sort of risk versus action decision for not only yourself as a leader, but also how it affects your people on the ground?
Well, there's always tension between the risk to the mission and risk to yourself or risk to the force. And then in the law enforcement emergency services, I mean, you've got other risks. You've got liability issues and things like that. Eh, Not that you don't have personal risk if in the military, but you could make the wrong call. But most people know what's going on. So I think the tendency of people in these things, these professions that we gravitate to is a bias for action. We're looking for people that are willing to do something. Um, One thing I have been impressed with is in my association with people in law enforcement emergency services, their knowledge of the law. They understand what the rules are. They understand what they can and cannot do. They understand what the line is for them to go up to and not cross, like dealing with somebody with a obvious mental health issue, whether they can, they may get a call and somebody say, "Hey, I need you. My relative is in there. They're acting crazy. I need you to go take them." And they go, "Well, I don't have the authority to do that unless they've committed a crime. If they're just, were they invited in your house?" So they know all the rules. And I think it's rules change, laws change, policies change. That's why you really got to know. It takes a certain amount of study and to stay up to speed on what the rules of the road are. But if you're in public service, you're a servant. You serve the community, and uh, yes, you don't want to put yourself at risk, but there's always going to be that tension. And so I can't tell people what they can and cannot do. I can't tell people, whether they should or should not put themselves. I mean, there's always going to be personal risk to your safety. I think we all understand that and we deal with that. Whether I'm going to run into a building or whether I'm going to address gunfire at a school or something like that. But the liability risk, it's there if you act and it's there if you don't act. And I think we've seen that in some of the school shootings where people fail to act in an appropriate manner and the courts adjudicated. So it's a difficult question. I think it goes down to knowing what the law is and what the rules are, and then what your personal. We all have personal levels of acceptance of risk. I've seen Marines do some incredibly risky things, like I'm sure we've seen you people in law enforcement have seen, run to the sound of the guns, if you will. Uh, and whether that may or may not be the the smartest thing to do or the lowest risk thing to do, uh, that's what we do. And hopefully, our civilian leaders and politicians recognize that that's what we do, and would give us, some credit for leaning toward the side of public safety and accepting personal risk for ourselves. But it's a very difficult question and probably worthy of that a lot of training goes into risk management. Um, it's a risky business, but Gordon Graham talks a lot about risk, and in his videos, just doing stuff to mitigate risk. Lock your car, make sure you got this done, make sure you know your TTPs, make sure all your stuff works, make sure you mentally prepared yourself for your shift. All those things. Know the law. Uh, Work well with your partner. Make sure you don't put yourself somewhere where you don't let other people. Make sure you communicate where you're going so that you have a backup on the way. That all mitigates risk, and I think those are all smart plays.
I'm going to translate one of the things you said there, General, into EMS, and it's a soapbox of mine. Also, people out there, lock your ambulances. Did you know, General, that every 2 weeks in the US, an ambulance is stolen from a hospital? Frightening, and there are ways to mitigate against that. That's my soapbox. I'm going to move on from there. Of course, with risk and with action could also come failure. And to err is human. Life isn't always perfect, or the operation isn't always perfect. How does a leader deal with failure? And also, how does a leader deal with, failure or lack of success within their organization? I've just been watching, Super Bowl has just been on recently, and obviously the winning team elated, the losing team looking very sad, but clearly have the task of picking themselves up, dusting themselves off, and getting back into the game or the fight. But how does a leader and then the leader deal with that, and also with that in amongst his followers?
Well, if you have a bad outcome, and it gets normal after any event, that we would do some sort of after action review and assess, why we got the result we got. Um, I think the same thing applies. I would think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to go back, and they didn't play a perfect game. I mean, they won convincingly, but uh, I think that part of your culture is, hey, no matter how well the outcome is, we still could have done better. Now, it's easy to be critical and analytical when you had a bad outcome or you didn't achieve, these things didn't go out the way you went. Maybe you weren't prepared, maybe you were just off, maybe you had a bad day, maybe you just got beat. You know, I mean, there's a difference between getting beat and losing. Okay, to me, if I got beat, the other team was just superior to me. If I lose, maybe you can't quit, but maybe I wasn't ready. I didn't anticipate. I didn't think about the stuff that it was going to happen. We didn't properly prepare, or we didn't execute. We didn't do. We made too many mistakes, too many penalties. For the case of the Chiefs, we couldn't block. Number 98. Of course, I don't know who can block Carter, but so and I guess at the end, the leader has got to accept accountability and responsibility for that, for the overall aggregate of the group. And I think a lot of people uh, sometimes don't see their leaders, whether it's true or not. They don't see their leaders stepping up and saying, "Hey, um, you know, it's on me. I'm the head. I'm the leader of this organization. I didn't do the right job. I didn't get people prepared. I got outcoached. We weren't ready, and that's on me." And so there's got to be some accountability, and I think that's it doesn't make it any better. It doesn't take away the fact that you didn't get the outcome you want, but then you take the pressure off everybody else. I mean, you can't blame everybody made mistakes. You can't blame players. The leaders got to share the risk and be accountable ultimately for what the overall mission of the group is.
Do you have an example from your career, General, where things haven't quite gone the way they should have done? And then how have you then turned that into, firstly a lesson identified, a lesson learned, and then an ongoing success?
Well, I was called to testify on Capitol Hill about sexual assault in the Marine Corps, and it was something that we'd been working on very hard to reduce or eliminate the causes of, but we weren't having any success. And so there were some things that happened on social media, and I got called up to testify. And quite frankly, got bludgeoned in a public forum, made the national news. Not one of my better days, but when I was asked, what am I going to do about this? And I said, well, it's this on me. I own this. We got to do better, and we'll figure it out. And if not, you can hold me responsible because I'm the leader of this organization. And so, as painful as that was, and I'm not saying we had any more success, three good things came out of it. There were some members of that committee who had started to have a more positive opinion about me and my leadership abilities. Uh, Second, the Marines that were I was responsible for leading saw me take a public criticism, and I think they were angry about that. And I was pretty new in the job, and it was no doubt after that that I was the commandant because I didn't do anything that I hadn't been trained to do. When you make a mistake in the Marine Corps and you get called in, you stand at attention in front of the commander's desk, and did you do that? Like, yeah, I did. Well, why'd you do it? You explain it. Don't do that again. Or some mistakes are forgivable, some are not. Uh, so it's not a comfortable feeling. Nobody likes to lose or not get a positive outcome. But if we learn from it and we can get better and we can actually affect change, there's lots of, in combat, sometimes people do the right thing and you get a really bad outcome. And so it doesn't, and I think it's the leader's responsibility to hold them accountable. But if they went through all the procedures, they did everything right, and it just turned out bad, and then you got to tell that individual, like, okay, because they don't feel good about the fact that they may have taken somebody's life or seriously injured them. But if they went through the procedure, you got to tell them, hey, look, you did everything right, bad outcome. We're going to investigate it, but I'm confident that it's going to show that you did everything that we trained you to do. And there will be no, I'm not going to say there will always be mental consequences to what you saw and what you did, but there'll be no legal consequences. So it's part of the job if you're leading people that do highly dangerous, highly risky things.
Excellent, and thank you for that example. Uh, Again, it's a great acceptance of responsibility and the sign of great leadership, and so excellent. Now, team building. Of course, you've had to build and keep the morale up of one of the most famous institutions on the planet, the U.S. Marine Corps. So, how do you create culture, and then what's your approach towards team building?
Well, I didn't really have to. I mean, the Marine Corps has its own culture, and then the Marine Corps will be 250 years old this year, and the culture that's been created over time is one of hard, tough training, individuals stepping up to fill the role of a leader when that leader may no longer be available or able to lead, uh, speaking truth to power, being physically fit, being able to meet the challenge and the rigors of the job that you have, uh, being honest, being fair, treating people with dignity and respect. Now, from time to time, are there members of the force that can lose their way? And they just need to be reminded, and if they correct themselves, and we continue on. So, you know, building on that was pretty easy. I mean, you got to be a person of virtue and character, and you have to go out and talk the talk and talk to Marines and tell them what the expectation is. Tell them, about their heritage. Uh, we use the history of the Marine Corps a lot in initial entry training and always around the Marine Corps birthday to remind everybody of those that went before us. And nobody wants to be the Marine that didn't do it, because we remind them all the Marines that preceded them from all walks of life, from all places in our country, from junior Marines to senior Marines, that they did when their time came, that they showed up and they executed. So there's an expectation, there's a pressure to do what you're supposed to do if and when that time comes. And I think the leader's job, and you remind people of that. And then you do the cheapest, easiest thing there is that a leader can do to develop culture and build cohesion is you set a good example. Um, you take your physical fitness test, you wear your uniform properly, you keep yourself scored away, you don't, you're not speaking ill of people. You treat everybody the same. A Marine is a Marine is a Marine. As a story goes back to when the Marine Corps allowed women to be Marines right after World War II. They asked the commandant then, well, what are you going to call them? Because in World War I, they were called marinettes. They were the first women in World War I, and they basically came in and did clerical stuff. But they actually had a women Marine Corps separate force after World War II, and they asked the commandant, what are you going to call him? He goes, we'll call him Marine. Okay, end of subject. Have we done well with that? Yeah, we've had our issues. The men in the Marine Corps have had theirs, but I think we're in a much, much better place. But at the end of the day, you're Marines. Active, reserve, male, female, doesn't matter. You're a Marine. I mean, and so just like the commercial says, uh, we don't, you join us, you earn the title Marine, and that's a title that you have the rest of your life. So there's an expectation, and you want to build on that expectation. So that's what I tried to do. And there are those, I mean, when people can't meet the standard for whatever reason, then we have to part ways.
So some amazing thoughts there. And for those listening, delete Marine Corps, insert your agency in terms of those principles that General Neller shared. We're just going to stop before we go on and have a quick message from our sponsor.
Lexipol empowers first responders and public servants to best meet the needs of their residents safely and responsibly. Serving more than 2 million public safety and government professionals in over 8,000 agencies and municipalities, Lexipol offers a range of solutions that includes policies, training, behavioral health resources, news and analysis, and grant assistance services for law enforcement, fire and rescue, EMS, local government, and other agencies dedicated to public safety. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com.
And we're back, and I always name drop here. That was the voice of Jim Dudley, who presents Policing Matters over on our partner channel, Police One. Please take a moment to go and visit Jim and his podcast. He has some amazing guests on. And also, as I said at the start of this particular one-stop, there's a great leadership resource available over on Police One. Again, we'll put the links in the show notes for the LEAP program, where you can hear another interview with General Neller. You can hear my interview with Special Forces operator from the UK, Dean Stott. You can also hear from Olympian Tracy Barnes, and actually very topical. We've been talking a lot about body cameras over the last few episodes of EMS One-Stop. There's a session on review of 100 body cam episodes of the Shots Fired podcast, where they look at on the police side, they actually spend a lot of time analyzing the body cam footage and then take and extract lessons to take away from that. Bit more difficult at EMS, obviously, with redaction and with HIPAA, but actually the guys do a great job of looking at that and extracting things that we should take away and learn. So links in the show notes. Also, please make sure that you like and subscribe. Remember that we're not only on the podcast platform where you get your podcast from, we're also over on YouTube. So you can either hear us on audio, or you can see myself, and in this case, General Neller, over on the YouTube channel. So thank you for that. And General, welcome back, and great first half. And I really want to just sort of kick off. We talked about leadership there. We talked about risk versus mission. We've talked about failure. We've talked about team building. But in terms of being the ethical leader and walking the walk, what's your advice?
You know, every year the lawyers would come in and give us our ethics class, and I'm sure the same thing happens in other institutions, and most of it had to do with, you know, receiving of gifts or travel, or, you know, what you could do, cars and vehicles. You know, when you look when you look at the discipline issues in the Marine Corps, junior officers get in trouble with alcohol, mid-grade officers usually have marital issues, and senior officers have problems with, you know, ethical stuff like gifts and cars and airplane use. Not that often, thank goodness, but it does happen. So again, you know, you know the rules, and I think it's easy for most people to follow the rules. You know, and I've watched a lot of people be successful, and I've sadly seen a few people be unsuccessful. And the ones I've seen that are unsuccessful, sometimes, you know, it's just bad luck. There's health issues, they have misfortune. You know, maybe they did something, made a decision with a bad outcome, and they accepted accountability and responsibility for it, and then that was the kind of the end. But other people, I mean, but those people were ethical, they're more moral, they were good leaders, they accepted responsibility. But there are others, a few, one is too many, and you see the same thing out in the public space. You know, they can't control themselves, they have issues with substance abuse, they have issues with maintaining their vows to their partner, they do criminal acts, or they're just not nice people. Maybe I still believe that, you know, good person, what was it, what Plato said, a good man speaking well, is the ultimate public speaker. So you have a character, you've got your ethos, you've got your persona. So how you carry yourself and all that is critically important. You know, and you have to have somebody help you, whether it's your staff or your spouse, or you have a lawyer or somebody, because there's things like, well, can I do that? I want to do that. Just because I want to do something doesn't mean I should do something. And as you get more senior, people want to do for you. They want to help you. They want to, you know, I'm not saying, you know, they want to be supportive of you because they know you're busy and they're trying to make your life better. But I would just remind everybody that, you know, if you'd be getting a senior position, Somehow your entire life you've been able to manage your own schedule. Somehow your entire life you've been able to carry your own bags. Somehow your entire life you've been able to get your own damn cup of coffee. So what changed? I packed my lunch. I packed my lunch when I was commandant because, I was fortunate enough to have you know, I took my lunch to the office because, I didn't want to spend the money. It was too cheap to spend the money to go get something. Sometimes I would, but, I was busy. And so what's different is you get more senior, you need to make sure that you're still the same person. And I think the worst thing you could say is somebody says to you, God, you've really changed since you got this job. And then you should ask the question, well, how? And if they're friends of yours, they'll probably tell you. So don't change. You are who you are. Um, the basic rules: take care of yourself, be fit, treat people properly, be careful. Watch your language because you're in a public place now. You can't talk like you used to talk. Being a good example, be a good steward of public resources, be a representative of the community. You want people to say, "Hey, look at that person. They're a man or woman of honor and virtue and courage. I trust them. They do a good job." Um, and they care. I mean, to me, that's the worst thing anybody could say about a leader is, well, they don't care. And I know we care, but you got to make sure people see it and they understand that you care for the right reason.
Very well said. You have to honor the people that work with you and around you. And one of the sort of questions I had to ask you was around, we've talked so far about leading, and you have to be a good leader without a doubt, but you also have to have good followers and people that are capable of following. And so, define for me, and I've heard you say this before, the difference between leadership and followership, and why you need to encourage and have good followers.
Well, if you've got great followers, being a good leader is, significantly easier than if you don't. So if you have people that bought in to what your ideas are, what your thoughts are, that they believe that you have equity and interest in their welfare and the mission of the organization, um, and that you're willing to listen to their ideas, because followership is not just blind obedience. Followership is supporting the mission, and good leadership is not complete suppression of ideas and other thoughts. Um, if you have time, and we talked earlier or another time about decision making. If you have time, it's great to get other people's input. Uh, first, it might be something you hadn't thought of. Second, it might be better than your idea. And third, it gives people equity in the decision. I would, the parable is, you go into a room, you have an idea what you're going to do way forward to solve an issue, but you go in the room and you ask everybody, hey, what do everybody think about this? And everybody says pretty much the same thing that you were already thinking. And it's much easier to say, instead of, well, I already thought of that and that's what we're going to do. The better answer is, hey, that's a great idea. Why don't you guys go out there and do that? So now they own it. You get the same outcome that you were looking for, but it came up from them and not down from you. And people want to be included in the process. I think people want to be asked their opinion. I always did. Some people maybe not, but I think most people want to be heard. Now, does that mean they're going to get their way all the time? No, but I think just being able to express your view is important to develop the cohesion and the sense of team. That if you've got the opportunity to do that, I would never pass that up.
Couple of things sort of back at you. As a junior officer in the British Army, there were two things that were drilled into us. One is what we call the 1/3, 2/3 rule, that the time you have available, you as the commander or the leader should only take 1/3 of that time in order to, make your decisions and make your plans, because you need to give the majority of the time to others to prepare. The other one, which I think kind of reflects on what you just finished up with there, is again the idea that tactics is no longer the opinion of the senior officer present, because you have well-trained individuals, you have folk that have ideas, and they're able to contribute to your thought process and indeed help you come up with a plan. And I think you make excellent points. Should we wait till we have 100% of the information before we get on and do stuff? Should the plan be absolutely certain, or can we move before that?
No, you're never going to have enough time. I mean, you can, paralysis by analysis to some point. Sometimes you're going to have to like, okay, we got to go. We got to do something. Of course, doing nothing is also a course of action. I think it was Patton that said a better solution applied now is better than the perfect solution applied 10 minutes later. And there's ways to manage your time. I mean, if you get a mission, a short fuse mission, and you don't have a lot of time, the first thing you should do is alert your subordinates like, okay, this just came down. I'm going to give you some guidance, but just be aware that we know we're going to be doing something like this. And so there's preparations that you can take to save time. It's called a warning order. I'm sure it's the same in the British Army.
Yes.
You issue a warning order, give everybody a heads up, and they can start. At least they're not like, maybe they got to wake people up. Maybe they got to go draw some supplies. Maybe they've got to, just start packing up their kit. Maybe they have to move. Or you can at least alert people that, hey, this is coming and we need to start thinking about it. And they probably anticipate. I mean, anticipation is a big part of leadership. I think good leaders are good anticipators. They're also curious, but they anticipate and they keep their team informed of what's going on. So, I mean, we time is, the variable. You never have enough time. But if you don't have a lot of time, and the people that are in the law enforcement and emergency services, they don't have a lot of time. That's why they go back to their training. They go back to their TT tactics, techniques, and procedures. They go back to the drill that they've done over and over again. And then, it's never going to be exactly the same, but a lot of stuff it's never routine, but at least you've got a framework from which you can go to, and then you can operate off of that if there is an anomaly in the situation.
You just hit a Ted Lasso line there, almost, General. Be curious, not judgmental. And even though he was a fictional character, I think that phrase really carries and works its way into, into current thinking, perhaps. Change is constant. And again, I think I heard you say, and I'm going to paraphrase you, and you can perhaps correct me in a second, but your Marines didn't like change, but they also didn't like things the way they are, or words to that effect. How, and obviously we've had an election. We have currently a lot of, change going on at the top. How should leaders and their followers, deal with and cope with this change? I mean, we can't just all give up and go home. That's not what we do in public safety. So, what's your advice on coping with change?
Well, actually, it was a sheriff in Michigan who said to me, cops and Marines are a lot alike. They don't
There you
like
go.
the way things are, but they don't want to change. Uh, change is uncomfortable. So particularly dramatic change. And I think that's something what we're seeing right now with our federal government. So, my advice would be, okay, let's see where this goes. The pendulum was one way, pendulum swing back and forth. Eventually the pendulum will somewhere get to the middle, and there'll be not status quo, but it'll be different than what it was, but it'll hopefully be some level of normalcy or whatever that is. Because I don't think people like anxiety. I think people want to know, people like routine. Like, when I get up in the morning or when I show up for work, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E. And unless it's, unless there's a bad climate, unless I'm working with people I don't like. So change is inevitable. If you're not changing, you're not making progress. There's always a better way to do it. And that was, frustrating. I think it's frustrating people. So some people, they get into a routine and, the old, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, but don't you think there might be a better way? And particularly in today's world where there's so much technology out there, whether it be from the use of artificial intelligence, whether it be use of robotics in a law enforcement, in the emergency services space. I think, for example, I think every police officer on patrol ought to have his own UAV to be out there if he doesn't have a backup or or give him an advantage. Or if I'm a fireman and I show up at a fire, I get a better picture of the fire if I can fly a UAV around the entire fire. And it's not going to take me long, take me a few seconds to get a better picture. Or I can watch the firefighters as they do their work and I can direct them because I can see parts of the building that I can't see because they're focused on what they're doing in front of them. Or, if I've got to contact somebody, I respond to an accident or some event where there's life at risk, and I want to talk to a doctor back at the ER, and the doctor wants to see it. Maybe I've got goggles or something on, or I can transmit a picture of the patient. I can transmit their vitals. I mean, maybe one day I'm talking to an AI doctor that gives me information. So that's all change, and it's coming, and it's gonna change significantly the way we do our business. Same thing in the military. I mean, yeah, we still fire artillery, we still shoot bullets, but the war in Ukraine has shown a tremendous change in the use of autonomous air and ground vehicles, and it's going to happen. And so you have to be aware of what's happening out there in the world. I mean, I'm even talking about biogenetics. I'm talking about DNA splicing. I mean, it's just on and on and on and on. And I'm not a scientist. I'm a history major, but I try to read this stuff and understand. So I would just tell everybody, you know, take it, leverage change, use it to your advantage. Don't be afraid of it, but be aware of the consequences because sometimes there are, second and third order effects which might not be advantageous. So just like body cameras was a change. If I were a law, I think from the great number of people that wear a body camera, it's to their advantage to wear that body camera because all it's going to show anybody watching it that they perform their duties in a competent, professional, caring, secure manner, and they went right down the rule of law. And now, are there going to be instances where people make mistakes and something bad, there's a bad outcome? Yeah, and that's what the guys on Shot Fire showed as a training event. Hey, this is what happened. I'm sure it's just of those hundreds of body camera videos they have, a lot of them are showing, hey, look what this officer did, how well they performed and how calm they were and how deliberative they were and how they followed the rule of law. And, regardless of the outcome. So, you know, change is scary, but don't be afraid.
I always had on the whiteboard in every office I've ever had is that if we do what we always did, we'll get what we always got. In other words, we have to be prepared to look forward. I'm also going to plug. You mentioned body-worn cameras, and actually, probably 50% of the interviews I've done in the last few months have had an element of body-worn cameras to them. And for those listening, please go back, look at my interview with New Orleans on their body-worn camera program. My subsequent interview with New Orleans, of course, on the events of January the 1st, and again, their body-worn cameras became a massive part of the evidence capture. And indeed, last week on the last event, when we spoke to the McLean lawyers, of course, one of the things they advocate for is not just cops, but obviously EMS and those involved in dealing with the general public need to have that contemporaneous record on them of what happened and when. And so you make an excellent and very topical point, General. I was going to ask you about AI, and I think that for full disclosure, I'm going to use AI to transcribe this interview, to write my show notes and to present them going forward, because that's actually a really useful way. I think AI, and you've already hinted at this, is going to bring the future towards us very, very quickly now, and we have to be prepared to adapt.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I think when we were out at SHOT Show, we talked about, how would you use AI to write a post-event report when you came off your shift. To me, you still got to redo it because you got to sign it, but the optimal report to me, if I had something that might result in a charge or something that has to go to the courts, it would be my written words and then a link to my body camera. That's like right in there. So like, you download the link to the event from your body camera and it goes into the report. So somebody reads the report, AI helps you write it. Cause I mean, who, what, where, when, this is what happened. This is what they said. You don't have to say this. Here's the body camera footage. I don't have to write what I said or what they did. This is it. It's right here. And so, you want me to testify? It used to be, I would imagine you going to testify saying, well, you wrote in your report. No, you just play the body camera footage in the courtroom. I have a a police officer friend who somebody made an allegation that he didn't improperly gave them a ticket for what they did, but he had the whole thing on body camera footage. He went to court, and all he did was like, Your Honor, here's the body camera footage, and here's how we showed the engagement with the individual. And the judge goes, okay. So I throw out the complaint. You did everything right.
That's exactly what Mike Pello and Shana Begin said to me last week when we talked about the events in Aurora. So you've hit that nail on the head. Final sort of formal question, if you like. You've led at all levels of the U.S. Marine Corps, whether it's a platoon commander or indeed the commandant. But put yourself in the place of an EMS, a fire, or a police chief right now. What do you think's keeping you awake at night?
Probably funding. Maybe recruiting and retention. It would be first, and then funding. Although I think the funding thing, I don't see, just reading the news, I don't think that public safety, law enforcement, emergency services, when this is the dust all settles, I think there's going to be, an increase. I think people are going to recognize that this is part of what we need. It's part of what the country needs, that we need to properly support. Now, does that mean, is that going to help recruiting? I think so. I think if individuals out there think that an organization is well funded, they're well trained, they're well respected, they're more likely to join. But recruiting is going to be tough. A lot of that will depend on what the job market is. Is employment, we're at or below, what economists would say is full employment, which I was told was 5%. So we've been at 4%. So hopefully there'll be funding out there to increase pay and benefits. And then if we can increase the manning level, then we have more opportunity for people to, take a training day or something like that. And just like, the military, we need good people to do this. It's hard work. You're never going to get rich, but it's good and honorable things to support your community, to support your city, to support your state, support your county, to support your nation. And our citizenry, they do respect and appreciate that. I remember as a kid growing up, I was always told, hey, if anything happens, go find a policeman and tell him. I remember that because a guy my mom went to high school with was a cop in Lansing, Michigan. And we used to be walking around downtown. And I remember I was told that as a kid, hey, if anything bad happens, go find a police officer because they'll take care of it. And it's got to be that way. The American people have got to believe that if somebody has a problem, they can come to you and you're going to try to help them fix it. You're the good guys.
And that is the public safety way. General, I have a standard question I ask at the end of every interview, and here goes. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask or anything you need to tell us?
No, I just would tell everybody out there, whoever's listening, if you're in the professions that Rob is representing, that I can only tell you I appreciate what you're doing. I hope you think I'm worth it. That's what I say when people now tell me, thank you for your service. I said, I think you're worth it. I hope you're worth it. I hope you think I'm worth it because I know you have a hard job and I appreciate it. Keep the faith. Don't get discouraged. Take care of yourself physically, mentally, and morally. Make sure you're working out if you can. Eat well. Try to sleep better. Drink less alcohol. I'm not judging, but self-medication is not going to make your problem go away. And if you have a problem, you need some help, go find a friend, or I'm sure there's people in your department, organization that'd be willing to talk to you that are there to help you deal with it. Don't let it eat you up if it's inside. So, but thanks. And Rob, I appreciate the opportunity to join you.
So thank you for your insight. There has been some absolute pearls of wisdom, which I'm going to extract and play back for everybody to hear, because I think they need to hear them. So for the moment, and I hope I can have you back sometime in the future, General Neller, thank you very much for joining us on EMS One-Stop.
Yes, sir. Have a great day. Thank you.
What an amazing discussion with General Robert B. Neller, former Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps. Some amazing insight there. And a lot of what he talked about, of course, if you can insert them into your own organization, there's some great pearls of leadership and a great handrail to take your own personal leadership, whether you're the leader or indeed the follower, because we need good followers as well as we need good leaders. So fantastic interview with General Neller, and I'm really grateful for him for giving up his time and for joining us. So that was another edition of EMS One-Stop. Please make sure that you like and subscribe. All of the links that we talked about are in the show notes. And so until next time, my guest was General Neller. I've been Rob Lawrence, and until next time, bye for now.